All right,
Back
here we
again.
are.
Again.
Episode 3, Dulcie Horwitz, Ryan Bear.
Still me.
Episode 3 of How to Survive Your Remodel, and we're going to be talking about something that people need to talk about, and then I want you to forget about, like, immediately, and that is, what's your schedule, right?
Right.
If you have some sort of tight need to have the schedule be a certain way,
Right.
you're going to be upset.
You're going to be upset.
One of the ways in which to reduce your stress around the schedule is to become a little bit informed as to what affects the schedule.
Right.
I'm going to talk about the first two things that affect the schedule, and then you're going to talk about construction.
Okay.
So when you work with me, we work before you get into construction. So we do design, and I have to sit down, we figure out and plan. That's called schematic design, like what you want, how big, the adjacencies, where they touch each other, maybe a little bit about what it looks like in general, style-wise, three-dimensionally. Once that's signed off on, we go into design development, we start picking out finishes, we start doing the 3D stuff. All these design decisions need to be drawn out, rendered, approved by the client, and it's amazing how long you think that might take.
Right.
Sometimes I can be very quick about it, but it can take the client quite a while to come to some sort of agreement upon what they like or don't like.
Or respond to those things.
Or respond to them, or to respond within themselves about it.
Or figure out what their own opinion even is.
Exactly. So, and that's just like the first 40% of what I do. Once those design decisions are made, then we can go into construction documents. This is mostly what people think I do, that I just jump right into the construction documents.
Right.
And I start doing what people think of as blueprints. And I understand that. But you don't want to do construction documents for things that haven't been thoroughly checked out for code, and in schematic design and in design development. And then also at the end of design development, most of the time we'll have a builder or an owner's rep budget it for somebody to make sure we're still on budget.
To see where you are before you even start.
Before we even do the blueprints, right?
Right.
And then we get into blueprints and we do all that stuff. We have it cost one more time. Sometimes we have to do value engineering.
Right.
And then finally, we have a set of drawings that is somewhere in the budget ballpark and is ready to go for permitting. The government is the government, and they exercise their right to take as long as they want to take, and they're overbooked, understaffed, whatever.
They are a moving target.
Yes.
That we don't control in any way.
And I have no control. Once I submit your project, I can tell you, they will tell me what their timeline is for the first round of corrections. Then you get the corrections, and I have to pick up the corrections. The structural engineer picks up the corrections, and then we resubmit. They have further corrections they want you to do, and you go round until the government says okay.
Right.
And sometimes, ask your friends, sometimes this process can take 6 to 8 weeks, and sometimes it can take a lot longer.
And depending on the building department and where you are and how busy they are, they might respond in 10 days, they might respond in 30 days.
Right. One that really gets my clients a lot is if in their little neighborhood, in their jurisdiction, they need to send out a 30-day notice to all of their neighbors because the window on the second floor is doing a certain item. So what will tend to happen is you submit for that particular permit.
Right.
The city will take however many days to deem your application complete.
Right.
Then they will send it out. Then it's another 30 days. And sometimes depending on how particular these little things, it could easily add another 2 months to the process.
And you have to take into account, like Dulcie said, your neighborhood, which is also your HOA.
Right. And their input as well.
And the city or the county, the building department is going to want permission from the HOA.
They won't do anything without their stamp.
Nothing. And the HOA will tell you that they like what you're doing or they don't, whenever they feel like it.
Right. So even if you want to change your gate in your driveway, we're involved in a project right now where they're 2 months, I think it is.
In 2 months.
Yeah. So now those two things, so the design process and getting through the drawings and also the permitting process takes a lot up on the schedule. But then when you get into construction, the image on the right there is what we call a Gantt chart.
Right.
And that is your whole world. I do not schedule trades. So why don't you speak to that?
That's also basically a snapshot of if the world was a perfect place and everything went
like
the way that it's supposed to, you could just look at this for your 2-month project or your year-long project.
So just explain to people what this chart is. What are those items?
So basically it's an order of operation of how the job has to be done.
Okay.
To move from one thing to the next, you can't start at the end because things have to go from the beginning through certain inspections. However, everything is affected by everything else. So during demo, you could discover something that you didn't know or the engineer didn't have on there that now we have to stop and get a little bit more engineering, get permission from the city again, pass it through the client, budget, all that stuff, and now everything on this shuffles.
Right.
So maybe you have a cosmetic change, you want a bigger window. Then you have to order a window, the window shows up a little bit later, you can't close up the envelope, that shows up a little bit later, and everyone wants all of these trades on the left side of this to be completely available when they're ready.
Right.
However, if you think about the poor people on the left side that are trying to do this for you,
Sure.
I'm assuming they have families and houses and a company that they're trying to keep running.
Right.
So let's say their work is 2 to 3 weeks, and they've scheduled it in this exact order on the chart to show up and do this for you.
Sure.
But we made a change, and now they can't come and do your windows for 2 weeks. Can't sit on your porch and wait for you to be ready.
Right.
So what if 15 of these trades, now everyone got moved for 2 weeks and they were already scheduled? Well, they have to go out and make some money.
Right.
And they're going to go start something else. What if that job is 2 weeks instead of 3 weeks?
Right.
Then they come out and they get back and everyone gets back in line and everyone gets rescheduled over and over and over. And that could be from, the building department, engineering, personal choices made by the client,
Sure.
a lot. And every conversation you had from this point forward will shift this chart around.
Yes.
And it's almost impossible to stick to this unless you spend, a year in planning and have all of your finishes and materials on site, and you've really, really done a lot of work that nobody wants to do and spend money on, and they want it to magically all line up and
Right.
be
I would
magical.
say
And it's
this is where we hear the most common complaint. Nobody showed up today.
right.
Right? How come there's nobody here? Right?
And I get
of the time,
texts every single day. What's happening today?
Right. How come nobody's
What's going
here?
on today?
Right. And that's a legitimate question. I mean, so this is us trying to explain. This is
Right.
us trying to educate you that, of course, if you don't have any idea that any of this is happening, then you're going to be that much more suspicious, you know what I mean, or untrusting.
And I think unique to this business is that we end up with clients, usually a client's going to hire you to do something because you're way better at it than they are, right? However, in my part of the project, I end up in explaining every single step so they know what to expect and what's going to happen. And then the next day, all of a sudden, they're a construction manager and they're instructing me on where are these people, why aren't they doing these exact things that you don't even know what you're talking about. And it's hundreds of conversations that all of a sudden aren't free.
Right, right.
Like, I can't explain why we shuffled 20 people because you picked a different kitchen countertop and now plumbing can't go in.
Or it's not just them, it could be the city inspector, it could be anything,
So
right?
many variables.
Right, and I have to say that most of the time, a lot of the times our clients are people that are in industries that are nothing like this.
Right.
My clients that suffer the most during construction are engineers, and I would say second to that are lawyers.
Right.
Because the engineers will do the math 3 times before they run the project.
Right.
And they do the math, they redo the math, they redo it, and then they run the project, and then they go to the next step. And if you ever have to go back, it means you were way negligent.
Right.
So
Why did you miss this?
Right. So engineers during construction, it drives them crazy because construction, it's not the way an engineer would do it at all, right? But it's actually just the industry. The industry is so shot through with all these permeable factors that
Right.
it's an organic, chaotic thing that, it's not for nothing that it's like herding cats. It really is. Like, even when you have all kinds of levels of supervision and oversight and everything, acts of God, weather, there's just so many things that happen, neighbors.
Right.
There's so many things that happen. So if
Money.
you're right. If you're an engineer,
The
or if
speed
you're
at which
very
money moves affects a lot of things.
Right. If you're a linear thinker, then you might want to prepare yourself
Right.
because on the one hand, I want you to understand schedule, but as we talk about this, I kind of want you to forget the schedule.
Right.
And just make sure that you have heavily referenced the builder and the architect that you're working with. If schedule is a concern, then make sure you've asked about the schedule on all of the references, because there has to be some level of trust there that goes on. And if you don't have the trust, you need to educate yourself as to
Right.
what's going on.
And if your expectation is that the schedule cannot shift and you have this emotional deadline, you're having a
Right.
wedding at the house and you
the
need this
wedding.
thing done.
Yes.
Okay, well, as these changes occur and you need this to be done, then
Right.
be prepared to pay overtime and to have trades stacked on top of each other. And if they can't show up and work because of somebody else, they're going to charge you.
Right.
They're going to charge me. They're going to, it's not free.
Yeah,
To stop and start and stop and start. When somebody bids that, they
Right.
come in, I'm going to do this in 2 weeks. Well, it took them 10 weeks because they came back and forth and back and forth and back and forth.
Exactly.
And that's not necessarily fair to them, and it might not be your fault. It could be engineering or a lot of other issues.
I know. It
But
falls under the category of good, fast, cheap, pick any two.
Yeah.
So if you want it to be good and you want it to be fast, it is not going to be cheap.
It is not cheap.
No. The big point on this one is to just get flexible. And if you need to educate yourself or to become more educated so
Right.
that you can trustingly become more flexible, then please do that. Because I would say that 90% of all of the unnecessary stress that happens with my clients
Yep.
comes from the schedule. That's it for a schedule. So kind of make one and then forget about it.
I like it. I wish somebody would do that one time.
I know,
Just
right?
once.
Just once.